All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Jeez, that delay is serious. All right, let's get into this. All right, everyone, welcome to episode 11 or day 11. Lesson 11 of September is significant. And if you're watching this outside of September, it is totally fine. You can still go through this process or these steps and to have a quantum leap wherever you are starting. So I know we're all the way down into episode 11 or lesson 11. If this is your first video, you're welcome to stay, but please go all the way back to the beginning because unlike a lot of videos, these do go in order and it is like the surface of a personal leadership program that I am developing. Part of it is something that I've experienced and learned, but with a twist on it. And so go back to the beginning so you understand, especially when I throw things out like your p-value and your personal statistical significance. So today we're talking about snowballing your failures and how to expect failures. Now, in general, we hear that, oh, failure is feedback. But what we don't like to fail. We don't like that. Now, it could be some people, this is specifically about targeting people who are similar to me, traditionally educated, maybe multiple degrees, or if you don't have multiple degrees, you've been in some sort of space where you had to take assessments and show up for things and for you to elevate. You're always constantly being assessed on something. So for that, a lot of us was it was college and in higher degrees where you were doing assignments, taking tests and things like that. Or you could have been similar to taking any kind of certification test. And I'm not talking about like coaching certifications. I'm talking about like out there in the world certifications where you went through something and you had to, be graded on what you knew. In that atmosphere, it was like, okay, that's the norm. But a lot of us have carried that over into our lives. And now we have this love-hate relationship, well, probably a hate relationship with failure. But I'm going to help you with that. And this is something that we need to discuss. Now, the reason why we're talking about failure all the way down here, because these build on each other. And I told you, you start gaining some momentum. The previous lesson we talked about your money story. And now you're like, okay, if you did the work, you're wide open and now you're ready to get back into the groove. And then you probably realize that you've hit another block, another personal glass ceiling or internal block. And it has something to do with failure. I learned this acronym for failure is finding fail. To fail means to find answers in life. So yes, failure is feedback, but if it's like kind of like I don't want to hear that, consider using this phrase, finding answers in life. I didn't come up with that. So take it, run with it. I don't even know who did it, but it was just during my time of personal growth, which you all know that I call personal leadership now. And so finding answers in life, and this is something that I just totally when I just forgot all about it, and this is why it's a constant reminder that going through all these steps is not a one and done, it's not a two and done. Every time you go to another level, you're going to have to encounter this. So the more you build your muscles, the less it will take for you to start from zero. So remember I talked about a staircase and you're always going to your next level, like reaching another target, becoming more and more of who you were created to be. When things happen in life and it knocks you down, life is going to punch you or slap you in the face, but it doesn't have to knock you down to where you're starting back at ground zero. You should be at the point where if you're at a level 70 and then something happens, maybe go to a 60, no less than like a 55, but you should not always have to go back to zero. And that's something that we have to make sure that we're very cognizant of as we are developing ourselves. Okay. So finding answers in life. And then I said how to expect failure. But there are two things. Sometimes when you have an expectation, well, I already said this before, sometimes our expectations are too low. Like you're expecting things not to work out. And that's something that you have to work on with yourself. Even if you don't know how it's going to work out, even if you've never done it before, you have to think like, of course this is going to work out. And if you're not expecting that, that's where anxiety comes up. And that's another topic we can talk about later on. But understand the difference between expectation and anxiety. You're like, okay, V, I did the expecting thing. I really went all in and it still did not work out. Okay, great, fantastic. First of all, celebrate yourself for already completing something and it was perfect, whatever you did. And we have to change our relationship with perfect. I've been doing that. I talk about in my book, Embracing Grit for Greatness. There is something about perfectionism that's not good, but the word perfect, if you really understand it, it means to complete something and you got an outcome as good as it was going to get. That is the definition of perfect. So if you set up to do something and it's completed, it was perfect. Okay, great. Now it didn't go out as you expected, even with all the high vibes you had, you really went in, no doubt, and it didn't work out because such is life. This is where re you start reframing the story of failure, finding answers in life. Now you're turning that into, you know what, this was just an experiment. So my background was in my learned background is STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And all the way, even in middle school, I always participated in some sort of experiments. And I thought I lost that a little bit after I changed majors in college from computer engineering to mathematics and education. But then I realized that my doctoral studies, my entire dissertation was an experiment. And I went on a walk this morning and that came to me, I was like, you know what? I always experiment. And so when you look at something as an experiment, just think back in school. Experiments, well, if you were in experiments were fun. You didn't know what was going to happen. And sometimes, well, I know for me and my crew, we would want things to mess up so we could see the boom happen. But it was so much fun when we did that. But when you become an adult and you get into real life, you're like you don't take those risks with experiments and we hold them so tight because it's like, oh, if I do something and I'm gonna mess it up, my life is over and it can be so catastrophic. And I'm not saying that things can't happen, but one, if you're a believer in Christ, we really need to let that go because it's like we should always be taking risks, knowing that we have a true safety net, right? But we still forget that. So let's stay in the practical sense because it's like intellectually we know that, but then we don't show up that way. So when you're focusing on something that's an experiment, I have a hypothesis, and this is where we talked about the statistical significance. I'm testing this out. In theory, I have an idea of what this should look like. But you know what? I'm going to have fun with it. I'm going to detach myself, and you have to do that, not take things so personal. And I know if you're in this advice industry, it's a little more challenging because you are the product, right? And if you have gone through the traditional education system where it is always you graded on something, so it is you. If you turn in a paper and it gets graded, it's your paper, like your words that they're grading. If you are I know when I was working as a college professor, I was always evaluated, like graded on my performance. And you're probably like that if you work in a corporate space. But if you detach yourself from that, you'll realize you're not taking things personal. And if they're saying that you need to improve something, then you're like, I experienced with that. You give me the feedback on that. You're giving me the feedback on that thing. All of this is just an experiment. So when you approach that and you come back with that childlike curiosity, you're like, this will be fun. What would happen if? And that's where you start tapping into that subconscious. Sometimes, people think it's the woo-woo side, but you're tapping into the what if. And remember, going back to the very first video, the lesson we talked about is the vision. So if you're think about this, everything that you're about to do or have done or want to try and you've been scared to try it, you have to think from the place of your future self. Think of the place from that vision. You are the person to lead that vision. So whatever you're doing, it's just an experiment to get you one step closer to that vision. That's the whole thing about like scientific research. It is all an experiment. That's how we got the greatest discoveries in life because they all started with an experiment. So if you focus on that, whatever you do, so I'll give you a personal example. I learned how to do this thing with list building and through summits, right? And the I got everything out I learned it, got trained on it, and I was like, in theory, all of this should work. And I literally followed all of the steps. And you know what? I did not get the results that I anticipated or expected to get, even doing all the results. I mean, even doing all of the steps. And at first I was bummed about it, but then I was like, you know what? Me, myself, I told you I do my own work before I tell people. I was like, did I finish? Did I complete the actual task? And from beginning to end, I was like, absolutely, I did it. And then I was like, did what did we learn about this? And I know it's like, why do we always have to do that? Well, do you give yourself your feedback? So it's like, well, what did I learn about that? I realized I don't like that. I don't like that method. However, I'm glad I learned it because now I can present it as an option to my clients and I can walk them through the process. But that's just something I just don't like to do it in that way. So that was an experiment. And I said, you know what? You did a great job because now you know that this is not the path for you and it's not aligned with what you're trying to do. It's not saying that it doesn't work. And that's another thing. Sometimes if you go in these with coaches, you remember I told you a lot of coaches are just actually consultants or strategists, even though they say there's a coaching program, very different. But you go to these people and you sign up for these programs and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't get the return on my investment. I didn't, get the results that I anticipated. No, you expected. No, you had anxiety going in, but that's another story. But if you really think about it as, you know what, I experimented with that way. First, be honest with yourself. Did you go all in and do everything that they instructed you to do? If you did not do that, this is not for you because you need to go back and do the work. But if you did that, and you're like, it didn't work for me. Instead of saying that, you say, you know what, that's an experiment. I tried it. There are some things that I learned about myself. Uh, that's I found an answer in life that this does not align with me, but I'm grateful for that knowledge. Another thing is when you think about, I have here feedback, you aren't the significant ingredient in other people's opinions. That's something else too. You have to separate yourself because everyone's going to have an opinion about something. And you, as the leader of yourself, you need to determine how you're going to filter that. And, and some people, now, when I say failure is feedback, and somebody was like, I saw two things I'm going to say. One thing I saw, I contribute to these articles and one article was like, well, if somebody questions your competence or your expertise or challenge you, how do you prove your worth or your value? I'm like, you don't have to prove anything. And everybody who gives you feedback, you gotta filter that because everyone doesn't get to give you feedback and you get to accept that. So some of the comments were like, first of all, if you really are coming at me a certain type of way, then maybe you need to go find somebody else, right? And I said, only people that I'm valuing feedback from are people I pay, people who are in my true close circle that know me, and then actual clients who pay me. Those are the people. Now, if you're just a random person, then your feedback is irrelevant to me. And we have to be like that, especially the higher we go and the closer we become really becoming ourselves and the more laser focused we are on that vision. And then so we have to realize that everyone's going to have an opinion. We don't have to take it. Another thing is you have to be, if you're going to put yourself out there, you have to be willing to see everything at first and then learn how to filter it through a different lens. So another example of this lady I saw on threads, I know I'll be on the threads, and she was like 11 years. I did the entrepreneurship thing and I'm just over it now. I want to go back. I want to work somewhere remotely, get a steady paycheck, and just have a regular life because I'm tired of wearing all the different hats. And people are like, well, good for you. People are like, well, good for you. You did it. You stuck it out, this, that, and the other. And I was like, that's cool. But this is what I also learned. And I have said, and I am learning that there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and a business owner. And there are levels to each one of those because you can have something that's really self-employed, but it's still a job. You just do everything yourself. And some people love that. I was like, I don't want to do that. Right. But so everyone is saying that. So that was some of the feedback. And then there was one person, because I was scrolling, because I had a thought to myself, but I was like, let me see if anybody else said this. And this person was like, so uh-oh, did I freeze? Somebody was like, over 10 years, you've been in this entrepreneurship game for over 10 years, and you said that you were tired of wearing all of these hats. It sounds to me like at some point you should have learned how to put some systems in place because you shouldn't have been working that hard like that, wearing all of the hats for over 10 years. And then so I shared this with my friend, and he was like, see, somebody always got something to say. And I was like, no, but you didn't say anything when everybody was congratulating her. I said this was part of the feedback. And the feedback I believe she needed to hear that. And she was like, you know what? That was true. And so the person was like, well, it would have been helpful if you'd have got some mentorship. So she had been doing this all on her own. So like, I know it feels like I'm all over the place. So let me ground this, that part of the feedback, and I'm glad she was open. She was like, yeah, I probably should have had mentorship because I shouldn't have been struggling like this for so long. Even though everybody was congratulating her for, oh, you stuck it out, you did good. But I believe part of the feedback that she needed to hear, and that she received was like, if you do this again, get some mentorship to help you out. So all of the feedback is not going to be what you want to hear. And even though, like I just gave you the example of the people I would get feedback from, but sometimes like that, then what you need to hear, be open to that. So even though that was a small thing, that was something that she could look forward to, but it wasn't even about her. It was about other people in the comments when that person responded. Now they know, oh, when I get into this, if I want to do my own thing, do my own business, start in entrepreneurship, I need to get some mentorship in place. All right. So I just want to give you those two kind of examples, right? All right, so the other thing is to understand this, and this was a lesson. You have to be, I'm not going to get too deep into this because it's something that I really go deep dive into my programs, but really understanding the difference between the actual person and the performer. Short version is you have to separate yourself from if you're going to do these experiments. If you were think of your life as the scientist, or if you were in the chemistry class, if the thing went boom and it wasn't supposed to go boom, that doesn't mean that you are the horrible person. It's just you mix up the wrong ingredients. And a lot of times we're so focused on trying to pull everything from everybody and try to mix all things up. And it's like then we wonder why our lives blow up and are in this catastrophe because we haven't filtered it through our personal ingredient list or our uh, formula for what aligns with you. And this is why I said all the way back at the beginning, you have to filter everything through that high level vision, your purpose, so you'll know which ingredients match. You can't just take somebody else's stuff. So like everything that I'm talking to you about, I can put this in a program and I can say, here, do these exact steps. I'm not going to do that because I realize that's not going to work. Now, is there an overarching like framework? Absolutely. But there are things that only are unique to you that can apply to you for you to get the results that you are created to have. So let me know if you're tracking. All right. And I'm going to end with this because this one is going to be short today. And this is the one that I think is going to resonate with you, or it may resonate with you, or it may sting you. When you are going through your life and you are getting results, you're doing things, but then you come to this part and something did not work as expected. And if you still feel like you can't move forward, or now you're afraid and you're stuck, and it's like, I just can't get past something, this is the problem. And people, you know how people say, oh, I'm so grateful for the lesson. I'm going to tell you why right now this is worth everything. If you never decide to work with me, and I know I've said that in a few videos, but seriously, if you never decide to work with me, understand this, and this is going to help you get stuck. And I personally continue to do this. And I have to ramp this up even more. There are some things that are coming up, and I was like, okay, I need to work through this. When people say you have to be grateful for the lesson, they forget another part. Are you ready? You can't be grateful for the lesson and be hateful towards the teacher. If you go through something, whatever it is, it could be nothing to do with business. Remember, there are about 15 areas of your life. Pick one. If you go through something and then you come out on the other side of that, you bounce back and it was like, okay, I learned from this. I'm grateful, blah, blah, blah. And then you still find yourself, why am I not progressing? Because you hate the teacher. Example, I with dissertation, we'll use that. going through that, a lot of you, if you follow me, you know the story, you know all of that. Got a couple of videos on YouTube, and actually, I can just go back to when I was fired at the university, and there are a lot of things that I learned about university life, and that have made me a stronger, better person, and all of that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm grateful for that time, but I had to sit down with myself and say, well, why am I not moving forward? Even though I say I learned something from all of my 5 years being there, it was because I was still pissed off at the institution and certain people, because those people in the overall institution, that was the teacher, that taught me the lesson. That was the catalyst. That was the instruction. I mean the institution of learning, even though I just said institution, but you know what I mean. It was all filtered through that and through actual people. So I was still angry and upset and bitter towards the teacher, which were the people and the overall institution, like how things were set up and things didn't go my way. And it wasn't until I was like, you know what? I'm glad I encountered those people, because without those people or without that environment, then I would have never gone through and learned this particular lesson or became this person on the other side of that. So don't forget that little tidbit of the what we just talked about as it relates to failure. You have to also be grateful for the teacher, even if it's something so painful. And I watched this at a retreat before, something so painful that somebody experienced. And even though she was able to talk about the lessons that she learned, she was still bumping up against the wall because she had to, I know, and I know some of you are gonna not like this, but she had to be grateful for the person who did those things to her that taught her that lesson. Now, don't go deep diving into your subconscious if you're not ready to go there. I would invite you to be in a safe container space with support, because you need to be able to bring yourself on the other side of that. So start with something small. There's something that you've gone through in your life, and then so you're like, well, how does this relate to snowballing your failures? If you are able to go back and start tracking everything in your, remember, in your vision, you've gone through the steps, and something within that vision, you have certain goals and targets that you want to accomplish. There's something smaller that you have not accomplished that related to your big vision. You've gone through the steps, but it's still like, what is it? You're like, okay, I'm stronger now, I'm more resilient, I know what to watch for, but you haven't gone back to the teacher that got you to that point. And not just the good things, the bad things, the thing that either it was a person, it was a situation, it was a thing, most likely it was a person, right? Even if it's yourself, start with those things. Say, you know what, if it wasn't for that person or if it wasn't for that situation, even though it was painful what I had to experience, I would have never realized, I would have never become this person, or I would have never learned this thing had it not been for that teacher. So I want to end that with you. Hopefully it's on a high note, but you can't be grateful towards the lesson and be hateful towards the teacher. All things work. They're either working on you, for you, or with you. And if you're going to progress and keep moving in life, then it's important that you learn how to move through these things as quickly as possible with ease and flow. Here's another example about failing forward and snowballing your failures. I just heard this story. I just saw this clip this morning, and I can't remember his name. It's VT. I don't know if he's from London. I think he's of Nigerian descent, but maybe he's from England. I don't know. BT. I can't pronounce his name, but it's a long African name. I think a Nigerian name. I think so. Bessie Busey. Anyway, but he was talking about Elon Musk, and Elon Musk, we know all the things he failed. Did you know? Did y'all know? And we up here tripping on our failures. Did you know that when he sold PayPal for all those millions and millions of dollars, he went broke, and then he had to start all over again. And then now he has Tesla, SpaceX, and anything else that we probably don't even know of. So let's chill out on our failures, okay? Because at least we're not failing, that publicly. That's another thing. Like when I say snowball your failures, you want to get to the point, in my opinion, you want to get to the point where you're failing so big that it brings attention, right? That's what snowball like. It starts small and it goes into an avalanche. Because if you're failing that big, look at the reward on the other side of him failing so much, finding the answers in life. So look at how much he experimented. Oh, that was Holy Spirit coming in. Look how much he experimented and look where it got him. You may not want to be at the level of Elon Musk, but what would your life look like if you start, you know what, I'm just gonna keep experimenting and I'm gonna get this momentum going because there's something on the other side of this experiment. And part of my mission is to bankrupt 1 billion burial plots. If you're not failing or trying to find the answers in life, they're inside of you, but they're just gonna be buried into the ground. Okay, that was a side note. So when I'm talking about be grateful for you can't be grateful for the lesson and hate the teachers. Elon Musk, um, he looked up to I think Neil Armstrong or the people that went off into space, and he said that he always looked up to them, and that's what moved him or inspired him to start SpaceX. And he said there was a time when I think it was Neil Armstrong or that crew, they testified against him saying that he shouldn't be allowed to do anything in the space. And he said for a moment that crushed him because he had looked up to them. And he was like, these were the people that, they inspired me. I looked up to them. They were like my role models. And that hurt me. Now, he was like, of course, he's gone on to do great things, but he also said that, well, I realized that there will still be disappointments no matter how great you think someone is, but it shouldn't stop me from doing what I needed to do. I believe because he had that disappointment and he worked through that, and he was like, well, it was good that I learned from them, or it was good that I was inspired by them, but I can't hold them at this high level. Thanks for my inspiration. And then he kept moving forward. What a lot of us do is we hear something that we don't like and then we sit in it, and then we'll work through some things and, forgive ourselves, or again, grateful for the lesson, but then we don't go back and say thank you for saying those. I mean, you don't physically have to go back to the person, say, you know what, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had this fuel to do what I need to do. All right, I'm going to end it right there. I hope all of that made sense because it just dropped in. I didn't have time to process it, so you always uh get a taste of me processing live when I get these downloads. All right, so thank you so much for listening and learning with me. One last thing. Remember that just because you failed or you're finding answers in life, it doesn't mean you as the person have failed. You are the chemist of what you're doing for your vision. You get to put the ingredients together, and sometimes things go boom, but that doesn't take away from your brilliance of knowing how to put things together in a formula, because there are some people who are not even trying to put things together. And you're like, well, wow, their life is so easy. Of course it is, because they're not even in the lab. Congratulate yourself for being in the lab. Continue to fail, continue to find those answers in life. Start that momentum, because on the other side of what you want to do, on the other side of things not working out, it is going to be a greater reward. I know that. I promise you. I guarantee that. And plus, it's biblical. All right. So thank you so much for listening and learning with me wherever you are, because we got to prepare for this supposedly hurricane. Wherever you are, whether you're beginning your day or ending your day, remember to be well, to be empowered, to be bold, and to be brilliant. Until next time, bye.